time as far as it has, and spent so much time on broadband, and thrilled to have you down here in Red Wing today. And obviously with our Red Wing Ignite project, there's a lot to talk about with what's happening down here. I'll probably joke about this later on, but I've spent my short legislative career talking about Red Wing as the home of of Red Wing shoes and Red Wing pottery. But I mean, with this Red Wing Ignite project, I mean, we're really raising the bar in terms of what we can do with 21st century infrastructure. And it's coincidental. I can't take any credit for what's happening here in Red Wing. It's great not to have to look too far to see what can be done with broadband when you put your district to it and get some local interest and commitment. I guess I'll maybe provide a little bit of a recap of this past session in the broadband and telecom front, and then also maybe a preview of what I think is coming down the pipe. And I'd really love to hear from the folks around the table today and your advice on things that we can do. Having kind of followed the broadband discussion for much of the last decade, I know we've had task forces, we've had reports, we've had recommendations, and in my mind it was high time that we did something with some of that good work that folks around the state have committed to doing. The Office of Broadband Development, I hope, is going to be that catalyst that's going to help us take some of the recommendations, some of the expertise that we've been able to gather, and kind of nudge that out, move things forward. And the office right now, I think the position's been posted. We're hoping to get that filled, I think, near about Labor Day or shortly thereafter, and hit the ground running in the fall. And I think there's a lot of work to be done in kind of defining what this Office of Broadband is going to be. I think it can be a lot of things, and we have a lot of shells in there, but I think just because we don't include Mays doesn't mean that office can't become something we're going to spell it out to be. I think working with the director is going to be important in kind of identifying, kind of a way for making that office work. One thing that I really wanted to make sure is that it was interagency, that it wasn't just about regulatory, it wasn't just in commerce, that we framed this in economic development terms. Coming from Red Wing and from, I consider myself a rural Minnesotan, I think that telecommunications infrastructure is it can level the playing field. And not just in rural Minnesota, I think throughout the state, but I think it's a good home that we found for it, indeed. And I really want to see this office interact with, Department of Health, Department of Transportation. Obviously, we have a charge for working towards the Big Ones policy with MnDOT. I think the sky's the limit. I truly mean that in terms of what this office can do and where this discussion can go. I think, above all, I'd like it to be a clearinghouse, a place for information exchange, so that we can bring the great kind of resources that are already in place with these task force efforts that we've had. A lot of really interesting work that's been done in broadband from different corners of the state and different organizations, and bring that to St. Paul and share that with legislators. I think that there's an education effort that needs to be made. I think in bringing my colleagues, myself up to speed with how important this stuff is in our daily lives, and not just in economic terms, but I think the quality of life, the freedom, being able to engage in the economy, being able to lead the lifestyle you want, coming from a rural part of the state, being able to raise a family and hope that your kids can stay there and find jobs there and be able to engage in 21st century commerce like they might in the Twin Cities metropolitan area, or in an area like Red Wing that's blessed with this kind of infrastructure business. So, I think the identifying I guess maybe gaps that we have, opportunities, partnerships. That's one thing I really want to see this office focus on is, how are we able to be a resource for the private sector, for incumbent providers in meeting the needs that they may have, and really bridge that gap. And I think it's easy to say these things, and I think with our task force, efforts over the years, we've identified a number of things that we can do, and now I think it's the time to actually take that step. And I think this Office of Broadband, I really am optimistic that once we get up and running this fall, we're going to be able to provide a lot of benefit for our communities, for stakeholders, for incumbent providers, and for folks who just want to learn more about broadband and what it can mean in their lives. And so I think that starting that office and getting that formed is step one. A couple of things that we were able to do this year, I think that and it's related, that data center tax credit is something that I advocated for, and I think that's helpful. I think tax policy can be used as an incentive to drive economic behavior. I'd also like to see us reverse course on that capital equipment tax exemption as well. Okay, and you guys are all familiar with that, right? So hopefully we're able to reverse course on that in the session ahead. I think there's a window of opportunity here. You look at the 2014 legislative session, I think it's pretty clear that it's going to be bonding year. I think that there's a keen interest in the Senate, I know, in having a conversation about transportation and traditional infrastructure, roads and bridges and transit and that sort of thing. And I think there's an opportunity for us to have a conversation, target conversation about telecommunications and broadband infrastructure, in aligning that with that broader discussion of infrastructure. And what are our needs? What are our opportunities? How can we put in place processes for meaningful partnerships? And whether it's our rural communities or the state, how can we be better partners with the private sector to reach goals? We set in place goals for Minnesota in terms of our upload and download speeds. We're not meeting those necessarily in every corner of the state. What can we do about unserved or underserved areas? So I think I would like to use this fall as an opportunity to engage groups like this, also the providers and the industry, and talk about goals and put together an agenda that hopefully we can collaborate around, and it can be a win-win, if you will. Everyone can come out ahead in the 2014 legislative session. So I kind of, having knocked on all those doors last summer and survived what was, I think, a very productive session here. I've spent a lot of time this summer kind of reflecting on my goals and what I'd like to do, and I'd like to use this fall as kind of taking that next step and engaging folks. So thrilled to be here today, and again, I really wanted to hear from folks around the table here in terms of what you might recommend we do, and hopefully we can just continue these conversations about the specifics for next year. And we can probably get into more specifics today, but I guess I'll leave it at that right now. I'm developing a terrible habit of talking too much, so I'll end before maybe I should, and allow for some questions or comments. We could just react a little bit to the discussion. So.
In good nature, I would say that's a Senate problem.
Oh, exactly. I could joke I'm on Senate time.
So I think we actually just, as a task force, had a conversation about the sales tax exemption, and I think that we are going to be drafting a letter to the governor and to the leadership of the majority and minority leaders in terms of, and tax chairs as well, about if tax issues are going to be discussed in a special session, making sure that this issue is included. These three things were presented as a package, and so we don't believe they should be separated out, and they should be dealt with together, and we think repealed, obviously, especially on the sales tax exemption issue. And so I think that one of the things that would be helpful, and we know this is always sensitive, but having some conversations with your own leadership about how important this issue is, and how you have been the champion for the issues around broadband in the Senate, and so being able to articulate that maybe with other friends about what's happening here. It's a little distressing. It seems like it's becoming a little bit of a polarized war on the issue, and we don't want to see that because we don't view it that way, and we think that it should be dealt with. And it would be better to do it sooner than later, just because we also know that on some of those other issues, as well as this issue, decisions are being made today about future investment for next year. I mean, it could be an accelerator or a limiter of what's going to happen.
Right. I mean, in Red Wing here, that warehouse tax has gotten a lot of attention, and with Red Wing Shoe and some other transportation logistics companies down here. But I think the thing that drives me nuts with this aspect of our tax bill is just the uncertainty we've created. And I think there's things the government can do, things the government probably shouldn't do, but to the extent we can, really try to provide certainty for the private sector. And I think that's, whether it's a warehouse tax or whether it's a capital, this investment tax exemption, I'd like to deal with those sooner rather than later. So I'm a little freshman though, so I mean, I also, but on the flip side, we can make noise and we can certainly advocate, we can talk to our colleagues, and these are things I feel really strongly about. So.
And I think being a bipartisan leader on the issue is probably a big deal. So.
I know there's interest on both sides of the aisle, so it's an opportunity I think for us. So yeah, I don't know. Does anyone have any I guess questions or comments or anything? I'm trying to kind of talk about broadband and telecommunications in a constructive manner. I really think there is an opportunity for us to thread the needle here and bring a diverse group of stakeholders together to move the needle and actually address some of these goals and items in your recent report. I don't know if there's anything that folks would just like to say, Matt, you do this, look at this. We got the office up and running.
You know, can I
Please.
just ask you, I'm going to ask one other question of you,
Sure.
and then we'll let people think on that, and ask you a question. Where do you think the largest gap is with your colleagues, or the couple largest gaps that we could be helpful with in terms of education or what they need to know, so that we can be more effective?
Yeah. I think telecommunications and broadband is viewed as a very technical realm. I think a lot of elected officials and folks who get it, I think, great, but I think it's easy to be intimidated by it. And I think people around the table, no problem with that, obviously. But I think just trying to break it down a little bit and talk about what it really is. And I think why it's important in our daily lives, and just being able to access the internet at your home or business isn't enough. I mean, we're talking about applications of today and of tomorrow. And in my view is that we really have to anticipate what will the future hold. And I think painting that picture, just because good enough is good enough for you today, it won't necessarily be that way down the road. And you really have to think about what you want information technology to be in your lives, and what other communities are doing. And I think we're kind of, Cocoon, or there's a fair amount of naivete in terms of what other communities are doing, what can be done with kind of cutting edge telecommunications infrastructure and applications, and I think just bringing folks up to speed with what's possible and what we expect to be possible down the road. I mean, in my mind, the communities that are really thinking, innovatively and entrepreneurially are putting themselves in a huge position of advantage. And I'm pleased to say I think Red Wing is too, but not every part of the state either is thinking that way or has the means of acting on that. And I think raising the level of understanding of what people are doing. And sorry, I'll try to limit my responses.
No. I actually think
I think that's it. I really think that's
we
what
should
it
try out
comes down
Fred's
to.
idea on you. Fred came up with a really novel idea
10 words or less.
to maybe demonstrate this to legislators to see, because I've shared my experience that many times we had to try to explain just how it all works and what does it mean. The meaning of speed, right? What does it mean? And for so many people, they, if you ask them to think about it in their head, they can't think about, what's a megabyte versus a gigabit look like. I mean, they can't think about that. But Fred had a very interesting idea. If you want to try, let's try that out.
Well,
I'll be your guinea pig.
I can be too long with it, so throw something. I ran into a similar issue with our tribal council. I've been the IT director there for a number of years, and they tend to ear flaps real close when I start talking because they all know all that about They usually say, yeah, Fred, cut to the chase. Is it a good idea? When I really want them to understand what it is I'm trying to say. We got into this entire discussion about the fiber home to the entire reservation, and they're like, yeah, and they just totally did not get that there's a difference. So what I did is I took one of my programmers and I had to write an application that did the same thing on 4 different computers. We hooked up to big screen TVs. And we just had it surfing the web, watching video, doing a Skype telephone call, and a few other things. They're just normal internet usage. We put all 4 of them beside each other, and then we bandwidth limited the first one to what would be DSL, and then we bandwidth limited the second one, which is typically what the cable provider would provide. And the third one we put at 100 megabit, and the last one we did a gigabit. And there was no conversation. It was running in the council chambers, and they walked in, and conversation opened, and they said, we want that one. And they were done. There was no need to explain, because as they just watched it, they couldn't even tell who they were talking to on the first one. And this guy conversation was just kind of wow, pixels. And the last one looked great, everything worked, and they said, that's the one we need. They said, that's the fiber.
Sure. Sure.
What do you think if we did that demonstration for your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, what do they say, a picture with 1,000 words? I mean, that sort of experience, I think, is priceless, and I think that's what, yeah, I mean, that's a sort of, I think, experience that folks need. And I mean, in a moment's time, it crystallizes the difference, and you can see, I think that's a great idea, and whatever form or venue that takes place, I think that's a great approach. And also getting into the specifics of applications. I mean, the more I get out there, we talk about, people don't think about this, precision agriculture. I mean, I don't know if you guys
We
have
just
talked about
talked
this.
about
Okay, yeah,
this.
okay, all right. So this
No,
group,
no, but tell us.
this
what
group
you
thinks
know.
about it, right? But increasingly, I go around last summer knocking on doors, subways down in southeastern Minnesota became my unofficial campaign headquarters. But you go there and you see, honestly, I don't want to know how much money I spent subway last year. Watch out, Jared, here we come. But you would go in there and you'd see groups of farmers kind of huddled around, and they'd be planning, either purchases or something like that, and you'd talk to them while you're here. Well, they have a couple laptops and they're actually accessing Wi-Fi. And that's not, hey, we've got, good coverage in certain areas, and that's not always the case throughout the district, or throughout rural Minnesota. But the point is, I mean, the applications, I think, really need to drive the discussion too. I think you look at the population and different people are pulled to an idea or solution or whatever for different reasons. And I think being able to bring that to life for them is important. I like your idea better, but I think that this is something that goes along those lines too. I mean, really, this is what it means to be telehealth. I mean, we've got great examples down in southeastern Minnesota. Obviously, Gary, we can talk about those. But I think that showing them, not telling them, but showing them, hey, this is what it can mean to you in the future. And I think that I've had a few conversations this summer about this, because there are other parts of the country that are kind of wanting to do a little bit more in this area, and they'll talk about this is freedom. I mean, you grew up in rural Minnesota, and I use rural Minnesota as an example, but it could really be anywhere. You grew up, in a hometown, and you see, your kids are flocking to the metro area. The college are maybe they stay there, they don't come back. But that telecommunications infrastructure can be a great equalizer that can bring them home, because it gives them an opportunity to engage not only in the economy, but also in, I guess, our life, our culture, in a way that's to be expected nowadays. And I do think it's the great equalizer. And you look at, differences in labor markets. I mean, we've heard so much about offshoring, but, hey, if you're able to have a facility in rural Minnesota where the labor markets may be a little bit different, where there is some savings in labor, but you're able to keep those jobs here. I mean, that's another application, I think, of how telecommunications can really be a win-win for communities. I mean, I could go on and on and on about this, and telehealth examples are really important too, but I think there's a story, a narrative to be told here, and I imagine this group has really already identified all aspects of that narrative. I think it's putting it together and how we talk about that, and then you got to drive down to what exactly are we talking about? What are the specifics? What are our goals? What is that win-win scenario that you kind of reference? So, I'm looking forward to having that conversation, and I think we're ready for it. And I think other parts of the country have been talking about things a little bit more and more about what can be done to improve, promote these meaningful public-private partnerships. And I know this group has talked about that too. So, love to hear if people have specific ideas here, or I can just continue this discussion too. To keep talking out, please.
Well, one of the things that's going to be happening here in Redwing is the pilot with HomeScreen,
Right.
which is a device telehome monitoring could be part of that, but it helps to integrate the person who's in their home, like elderly person in their home, to stay in their home and being more integrated with their community. But also, it can be used as a health station in their home. And so this is a very big concern for telehealth, for telehome monitoring, for keeping people in their home, for socioeconomic development. The keeping the elderly in their home is just a huge thing. And it's devices like that that can actually help to do that. And so the last mile, is like you're saying, Fred, is very, very important. There's also going to be some efforts that will be coming forward in Minnesota regarding the security. How much security is needed in terms of the medical record and related to personal health record use. So, personal health records are somewhat restricted by how much information can be shared because of our Minnesota very strict laws regarding security. And people don't really understand them. It's kind of the same thing like you're saying, that people don't understand it. And so they say, oh yeah, this sounds good, let's have this amount of security. Well, if you decide on that amount of security, you can't do many things that, people really would like to have coming through them. There's personal health record. For instance, you can't download the stuff that's going to be coming from the home screen, because you can't download that if you don't, because of our security rules. So that's something that we're going to be seeing more efforts on and needs to be really watched in order to say, okay, are we ready to make this next week? And to say, we don't need that, let's redecide.
Maureen, is payment an issue too, still for services?
Payment is an issue for telehealth services in general. We really support mandated insurance coverage for telehealth. Some states have it. California has been a leader in that, for instance. That the coverage should be the same as an in-person visit. Because what happens is certain people who are not covered, for instance, pharmacy doctors, genetic counselors, therapists, speech pathologists, many of the applications that we can do very well using telehealth, they're not covered. And so mandated coverage from insurance coverage is another thing. And then to take away the restriction that says you have to be in a health professional shortage area.
Sure.
Because in some places that are not declared health professional shortage areas, just because they're, they don't have it, have the critical mass that have gone through that process. Or else they're in the metropolitan area county.
Sure.
Say like, northern, like Aurora, Minnesota, Hibbing, they're not a health professional shortage area, which, should be,
So I think your point, it's not just about infrastructure, it's about, really getting our laws and our, code up to speed with the reality of the 21st century and allowing these applications to actually be utilized. Yeah, and I'm sure there's a number of examples like that, and I'd be all ears, if people have any specifics in mind.
Yeah, I'd like to just share something. So I lead the broadband adoption subgroup, and so we as a subgroup have created, we purchased the ybroadband.org site, and we're creating it as the interesting thing, we said, yes, you have to have internet access to get to it, but we look at it as kind of a central clearinghouse. It's starting out very, very basic, so we haven't created new information, but we're trying to categorize and organize. So one of the things we have is like all of the community education sites. You can basically get to them if you want to get. We didn't link them directly to all the computer training, but it's community education. And then we have like getting a computer for low cost, no cost. We have a lot of provider programs there. We also have like PCs for people and a lot of very basic educational programs. We think something like that, even just marketing it and getting more information out there about it. I think practical uses. So here's a really simple example. We had in St. Joe, Minnesota, we had a family reunion. We Skyped one of my cousins who was in Arizona, but she couldn't see everybody. I'm like, oh, we'll FaceTime you. We Skyped, we FaceTime, and my aunt was like, what's that? Showing people what they can do like that. It's like, she goes, oh, thanks for bringing the family reunion to me. And so I'm like, just small things like that, I have my 93-year-old aunt, she's like, who's that? Oh, where is she? They don't get it until they see it.
And then it makes sense. It's not
exactly
theoretical or abstract.
Yep. Recording something like that for people to see and say, look what you can do. Give them a little tablet or something. And very practical use.
Yeah. You from St. Joe?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. No, it's St. John. It's like 2 miles away. So.
We call it close.
Okay, very good. Very good.
Well, I think that we are at that point. Are you going to stick around
Yeah,
now?
yeah.
Because you're sticking
Yeah,
around
yep.
through the reception here. I just want to make sure we stay on task because there is a hard stop at probably about 3:10 or so, since Redwood